Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to be tackling something really, really important to all of us, I think, and that's how sleep affects children's emotional well-being.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and we've really tried to pull out all the stops on the sources here.
Hmm.
We've got medical research articles, we've got university publications, parenting guides, and even some expert insights.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at this topic from all sides
Absolutely.
and to really kind of get a comprehensive picture of what's going on. It's something that we often overlook.
Yeah, yeah, we kind of just brush it off like, oh, kids will be kids, they'll get over it.
Exactly. We think about, oh, they're just cranky because they're tired.
Right.
And while that's true, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, there really is. And it makes you wonder if, if we're not giving it enough, uh, I guess, attention.
Well, and if we're not giving ourselves enough attention either, right? I mean, how do we feel after a bad night's sleep?
Oh, awful.
I know if I don't sleep well, I'm not as patient with my kids, I'm not as productive at work. It really does impact everything.
Everything. Yeah. And I think, as adults, we often power through it. We have our coffee or whatever. But kids, they don't have those coping mechanisms.
Right. And their brains are still developing, so the impact of sleep deprivation can be even more profound.
That's what's scary.
Yeah. The National Sleep Foundation, they report that nearly 30% of children and 75% of teenagers aren't getting enough sleep.
Those are some pretty stark numbers.
Yeah. And that chronic sleep deprivation, it's linked to a higher risk of mental health problems.
See, this is why this deep dive is so important.
Yeah.
Because, we hear those things and we think, oh, well, teenagers are moody anyway or whatever.
Exactly.
But this is actually impacting, their brain development and their long-term well-being.
And it's not just teenagers, even younger kids, those with persistent sleep problems in preschool or those early school years. Research is showing they're at a higher risk for things like anxiety and depression later in life.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty serious stuff.
So it's not just about, having a grumpy kid in the morning. This is actually, shaping who they are.
Absolutely. It's about their emotional development, their ability to regulate their emotions, to learn and to grow into healthy adults.
Okay, so we know it's important. We know the potential risks. But what's actually happening in the brain when we sleep? Like, what's the connection between sleep and emotional well-being?
Well, there's different phases of sleep that we cycle throughout the night. There's non-REM sleep, which is sort of that light sleep, and then deep sleep, and then there's REM sleep when we dream.
Yeah, okay. I remember learning about that in, like, high school biology or something.
Right, exactly. And each of these phases plays a different role, in our overall health and well-being.
And for kids, like, are those phases different? I mean, do they need more of one type of sleep than adults do?
They do. Children, they actually spend proportionally more time in deep sleep than adults do. And that deep sleep is really crucial for, brain development, memory consolidation, all those things that are so important in those early years.
So when kids are sleep deprived, are they basically missing out on this deep sleep?
Exactly. Sleep deprivation, it disrupts those carefully orchestrated sleep cycles. It's like, if you imagine your brain as an orchestra,
Yeah.
and each instrument has to play its part at the right time.
Yeah.
But if one section is missing, the whole symphony is off.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And that's kind of what happens with sleep deprivation. It throws everything off balance.
And that affects their emotional development.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a car trying to run on fumes.
Yeah.
It might sputter along for a while, but eventually it's going to break down.
And this isn't just, theoretical. Like, have there actually been studies that show how this plays out in real life?
Oh, absolutely. There was one study where they restricted children to just 2 nights of moderate sleep loss. Just 2 nights.
Wow.
And what they found was that these kids showed a decrease in positive emotions. They weren't as happy. They weren't as excited about things.
That's really sad.
And they also had a dampened response to positive things. Like, they just weren't as engaged.
So it's not just about being grumpy. It's about their ability to experience joy.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then on the flip side, they also saw an increase in anxiety, particularly in those kids who were already prone to it.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And you said this was just after 2 nights.
Just 2 nights.
That's pretty powerful evidence that sleep is essential. And this isn't just for kids, right? I mean, we all know how we feel after a bad night's sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another study, this one focused on adults, and they found that those who were sleep deprived had more intense reactions to negative images, like things that would normally just kind of unpleasant became much more upsetting to them.
So they're more sensitive.
More sensitive, yeah. And they also had less activity in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, remind me, what's the prefrontal cortex responsible for?
That's the part of our brain that's responsible for, things like decision making, impulse control, and emotional regulation.
Oh, wow. So lack of sleep is actually
Right.
affecting our ability to, control our emotions.
Exactly. It's like taking the brakes off.
No wonder kids are having meltdowns when they're tired.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of parents listening right now are probably thinking, okay, this is all very interesting and scary, but what can I actually do about it? Like, I can't force my kid to sleep.
Right, and just saying go to bed isn't very helpful either.
No, no, not at all.
It's really about establishing healthy sleep routines.
Okay, so routines are key.
Yeah. And while those routines might look different for different ages, the underlying principles are the same.
So what are some of those principles? Like, what can parents do, regardless of their child's age, to promote better sleep?
Well, consistency is huge, like setting consistent bedtimes and wake-up times, even on weekends.
Okay.
This helps regulate the body's natural sleep-wake cycle. It's like setting your internal clock.
It's creating those healthy habits early on.
Exactly. And then think about creating a calming bedtime routine, like, a warm bath, reading a book together, dimming the lights. All of these things signal to the body that it's time to wind down.
Right. I've definitely noticed with my own kids that if we just like run around and are loud and crazy right up until bedtime, it's a lot harder for them to fall asleep.
Right. It's about creating that sense of calm and relaxation.
Okay, so consistency and a good bedtime routine.
Yeah.
What about screens? I feel like that's a huge challenge these days.
It is. The blue light that's emitted from screens can interfere with melatonin production.
Right, melatonin, that's the hormone that helps us sleep.
Exactly. So no screens for at least an hour before bed is ideal.
I'm sure most parents are cringing right now thinking, good luck with that.
It's tough. It is tough. But it can make a huge difference.
So what about during the day? Are there things that parents can do to help promote better sleep at night?
Absolutely. Encouraging physical activity during the day can help, but try to avoid it too close to bedtime.
So tire them out, but not right before bed.
Right. And then be mindful of what they're eating and drinking, like caffeine and sugary drinks in the evening. No good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we've got the routines, we've got the screen time, the diet, and then, of course, there's the sleep environment itself, right?
Definitely. You want to create a cool, dark, and quiet room. Think about things like blackout curtains, white noise machines, or a fan for some soothing background noise.
Yeah, I find that even for myself, if it's too bright or too noisy, it's hard to fall asleep.
Absolutely. It's all about creating that ideal sleep sanctuary.
Now, I know a lot of parents are turning to melatonin supplements to help their kids sleep. What are your thoughts on that?
It's really a conversation that parents should have with their pediatrician. While melatonin can be helpful in some cases, some parents are wary of potential side effects.
Right.
And I think for a lot of kids, focusing on those natural solutions that we talked about,
Hmm.
the relaxation techniques, the diet, the sleep environment, those might be preferable. It's about getting to the root of the problem.
And speaking of diet, are there any specific nutrients that can help promote sleep?
There are. Magnesium, for example, is a natural muscle relaxant. So foods like almonds, avocados, those can be beneficial.
Okay.
And vitamin B6, it actually helps with melatonin production. So, things like chickpeas, salmon, those are good sources of B6.
Wow. So much to think about. It really is holistic, isn't it? Like, sleep affects everything.
It really does. And, it's not just about the environment and the routines. There's also this really powerful element of parental modeling.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, children are incredibly perceptive. They pick up on our habits, both good and bad. If parents prioritize their own sleep and have consistent sleep routines themselves, their children are much more likely to follow suit.
So we have to practice what we preach.
Exactly. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Because I think, a lot of parents, myself included, we kind of fall into this trap of thinking, oh, I can run on less sleep. I'm an adult.
Right. It's like we wear our sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. Like it's a sign of how busy and important we are.
Exactly. But that's sending the wrong message to our kids.
Absolutely. We're basically saying sleep is something you can sacrifice when you're, busy and important.
Right. And we don't want them thinking that.
No, we want them to understand that sleep is a priority. It's essential for their health and well-being.
You mentioned earlier that there might be certain periods in a child's development where sleep is particularly crucial. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Of course. Brain development, it's not a linear process. Different regions of the brain mature at different rates. And there's growing evidence that the transition from late childhood into adolescence might be one of those really key periods where sleep is absolutely crucial for healthy emotional development.
Okay, so the teenage years.
Exactly.
And that makes sense, right? Because, I mean, think about all the changes that are happening during that time. Puberty, social pressures, academic demands, it's a lot.
It is. It's a lot to handle. And inadequate sleep during this critical phase, it can have a ripple effect, impacting everything from, their mood, their ability to regulate their impulses, their social interactions, their ability to learn.
So it's not just about them being grumpy teenagers, it's really impacting their ability to function in all areas of life.
Exactly.
So what does the research tell us about the specific ways that sleep deprivation might affect teenagers' emotional well-being? Like,
Yeah.
what are we actually seeing in the studies?
Well, studies have shown that sleep-deprived teens are much more likely to experience mood swings, irritability, and even symptoms of anxiety and depression. They also may struggle with things like focus, concentration, problem solving. It really does affect their ability to learn and to thrive in school.
And I imagine it can create a vicious cycle, right? Like, sleep deprivation leads to emotional problems, which then make it harder to sleep well.
You've hit the nail on the head. It really does. And that cycle can be difficult to break.
So if this transition into adolescence is such a crucial time for sleep, what are the long-term implications of chronic sleep deprivation during this stage? Like, are we talking about potential problems that could last into adulthood?
That's a question that researchers are still exploring, but there's growing concern that chronic sleep loss during adolescence could have lasting consequences, potentially increasing the risk of things like mental health issues in adulthood.
Like we're setting them up for a lifetime of struggles.
And the irony is that teenagers often need more sleep than younger children, yet they're facing increasing pressure from all sides.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Academic competition is fierce. Social media is a constant source of comparison and stress, and many teens are juggling extracurricular activities, part-time jobs, family responsibilities. It's a lot.
It's a lot, and sleep is often the first thing to go.
So are we basically setting them up to fail? I mean, if we're telling them that they need to do all these things, but then we're not giving them the time or the support to get enough sleep.
Well, and we're also sending mixed messages, right? We praise hard work and dedication, but we inadvertently glorify sleep deprivation as a badge of honor.
It's like we're saying you can sleep when you're dead, which is, of course, a terrible message to send, especially to young people who are still developing their beliefs and their habits.
It's a real problem, and it requires a shift in mindset, both at the individual level and at the societal level. We need to start valuing sleep as a fundamental need, not a luxury or a sign of weakness.
So it's not just about telling our kids to go to bed earlier. It's about changing the way we view sleep as a culture.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've established that sleep is crucial. We've talked about some strategies for promoting healthy sleep habits. But I'm curious about those kids who are already struggling. Those who are consistently having trouble sleeping. What can parents do in those situations?
I think in those situations, it's essential to work with a healthcare professional.
Okay, to involve the doctor.
Yeah, there could be an underlying medical condition or a sleep disorder that needs to be addressed, or it could be something behavioral like anxiety or stress.
Right.
And there are a variety of treatments available, from cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia to medication to addressing any underlying medical conditions.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. It really requires a personalized approach based on the child's specific needs.
But there's hope for those families who are struggling.
Absolutely. There's a lot of hope. With the right guidance and support, they can find solutions that work for their child.
And, even beyond addressing specific sleep problems, there are things that parents can do to create a more sleep-supportive environment for their children in general, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with, thinking about the messages that we're sending about sleep. Like, do we talk about it as a luxury or as a fundamental need? Do we prioritize our own sleep, or do we, wear sleep deprivation as a badge of honor?
It's almost like a status symbol to be busy and sleep deprived. Like, look how much I'm doing.
Yeah, and that can be really damaging, especially for children who are still forming their own beliefs and habits around sleep.
So we need to change the narrative.
We do. We need to start talking about sleep as an essential part of a healthy lifestyle, just like eating right and exercising.
So it's about more than just, telling our kids to go to bed. It's about changing our own behavior and attitudes towards sleep.
Absolutely. It's about making those small but significant shifts that create a culture of sleep within our families.
Well, this has been such a fascinating and informative conversation. I'm already thinking about all the things I need to change in my own household.
Me too.
But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this topic. Like, what's the most important takeaway that you want listeners to remember?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that sleep is not optional. It's not a luxury, it's a fundamental biological need, just like eating and breathing. And when it comes to children's emotional well-being, prioritizing sleep is one of the most powerful investments that we can make.
And that investment pays dividends not just in childhood, but throughout their entire lives.
Precisely.
Wow, couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm.
So for our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the importance of sleep and empowered you with the knowledge and the tools to create a more sleep-supportive environment for the children in your lives.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. There are so many resources available to help you navigate the world of children's sleep, and we encourage you to keep learning and exploring. And if you're noticing persistent sleep problems, don't hesitate to reach out to your child's doctor. There's help available, and there's no shame in seeking guidance.
Sleep well, everyone.
Sleep well. We were just talking about how important sleep is for a child's emotional development, and how it really lays the foundation for their ability to learn and to manage their emotions and build healthy relationships, all that good stuff.
And it's not about trying to create these, like, perfect little robots who never have a meltdown.
No, no, not at all.
It's about giving them the tools they need to navigate the ups and downs of life.
Exactly. A well-rested child is more likely to be resilient, more adaptable, better equipped to handle those challenges.
You mentioned earlier that there might be, like, specific periods in a child's development where sleep is even more crucial.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. We know that brain development is incredibly dynamic,
Yeah.
different regions maturing at different times. And research is suggesting that the transition from late childhood into adolescence might be one of those key periods where sleep plays an especially vital role in, healthy emotional development.
The teenage years.
Exactly.
And that makes sense. I mean, think about all the changes that are happening during that time. Puberty, social pressures, academic demands. It's like a recipe for disaster if you're not sleeping.
It is. It's a lot to handle, and inadequate sleep during this critical phase can have a ripple effect, impacting everything from their mood to impulse control, their social interactions.
So it's not just about them being, like, grumpy teenagers.
No,
This is actually, affecting their ability to function in all areas of their life.
it really is.
So what's the research tell us about, like, the specific ways sleep deprivation might affect teenagers' emotional well-being? What are we actually seeing?
Well, we're seeing that sleep-deprived teens are more likely to experience mood swings, irritability, even symptoms of anxiety and depression. They may also struggle with focus, concentration, problem solving. It can really affect their ability to learn and to thrive in school.
So it's academic as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. And I imagine it can create this, like, vicious cycle, right?
Mm.
Where sleep deprivation leads to emotional problems, which then make it harder to sleep well.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. It becomes this self-perpetuating cycle that can be really difficult to break.
So if this transition into adolescence is such a crucial time for sleep, what are the long-term implications of, chronic sleep deprivation during this stage? I mean, are we talking about potential problems that could even last into adulthood?
That's a question that researchers are actively investigating, and the emerging evidence is definitely pointing in that direction. It seems that, chronic sleep deprivation during these really formative years can have a lasting effect on brain development. It can potentially, make individuals more vulnerable to mental health challenges later in life.
That's kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, it is. It's like, we're setting them up for a lifetime of struggles. And the irony is that teenagers often need more sleep than younger children, yet they're facing increasing pressure from all sides.
Right. We've got academic competition that's, like, off the charts these days. We've got social media, which is this constant source of, comparison and stress. And many teens are juggling extracurriculars, part-time jobs, family responsibilities. It's a lot to put on their plates.
It's a lot, and sleep is often the first thing to go. And, we're not helping by sending these mixed messages. We praise hard work and dedication, but we inadvertently glorify sleep deprivation as a badge of honor.
Right, like it's something to be proud of.
Yeah, like look how little sleep I can function on.
But that's, like, the worst message to send.
It is, especially to young people who are still developing their beliefs and their habits around sleep. It's a real problem, and it requires a shift in mindset,
Mhm.
both at the individual level and at the societal level. We need to start valuing sleep as a fundamental need and not a luxury or a sign of weakness.
So it's not just about telling our kids to go to bed earlier. It's about changing the way we view sleep as a society.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established that sleep is, absolutely crucial. We've talked about some strategies for promoting healthy sleep habits, but I'm curious about those kids who are already struggling. Those who are consistently having trouble sleeping. What can parents do in those situations?
I think in those situations, it's essential to work with a healthcare professional.
So involve the doctor.
Yeah, there could be an underlying medical condition or a sleep disorder that needs to be addressed, or it could be something behavioral like anxiety or stress.
Right, so it's not like a one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly. And there are a variety of treatments available from cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia to medication to addressing any underlying medical conditions.
So there is hope for those families who are struggling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hope. With the right guidance and support, they can find solutions that work for their child.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
And even beyond addressing specific sleep problems, are there things that parents can do to create a more sleep supportive environment for their children in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with thinking about the messages that we're sending about sleep. Like, do we talk about it as a luxury or as a fundamental need? Do we prioritize our own sleep or do we, wear sleep deprivation as a badge of honor?
It's like it's a status symbol almost to be so busy and sleep deprived.
Yeah. And that can be incredibly damaging, especially for children who are still forming their own beliefs and habits around sleep.
So we really need to change that whole narrative.
We do. We need to start talking about sleep as an essential part of a healthy lifestyle, just like eating right and exercising.
So it's about more than just telling our kids to go to bed. It's about, changing our own behavior and attitudes towards sleep.
Absolutely. It's about making those small but significant shifts that create a culture of sleep within our families.
I love that. A culture of sleep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a rich and insightful conversation. We've covered so much ground from, the science of sleep to practical tips for parents, and we've even delved into like these societal factors that impact children's sleep.
And what's fascinating is that the research in this area is constantly evolving. There's always more to learn about the complex relationship between sleep and child development.
Well, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this topic. Like, what's the most important takeaway you want listeners to remember?
I think the most important takeaway is that sleep is not optional. It's not a luxury. It's a fundamental biological need, just like eating and breathing. And when it comes to children's emotional well-being, prioritizing sleep is one of the most powerful investments we can make.
And that investment pays dividends, not just in childhood, but, throughout their entire lives. I
Precisely.
couldn't have said it better myself. So for all of our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the importance of sleep and empowered you with the knowledge and tools to create a more sleep-supportive environment for the children in your lives.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. There are so many resources available to help you navigate the world of children's sleep, and we encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring. And if you're noticing persistent sleep problems, don't hesitate to reach out to your child's doctor. There's help available, and there's no shame in seeking guidance.
Sleep well, everyone.
Sleep well.
This deep dive has really hit home for me how crucial sleep is for kids. Not just for them to, avoid being cranky, but for their emotional development, learning, even, long-term mental health.
Yeah, it's something we often just, sweep under the rug, don't we? We focus on nutrition, exercise, education, but sleep is really the foundation for all of it.
It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation.
Exactly.
It might look okay for a little while, but eventually it's gonna fall apart.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially true during, those more critical periods of development, like we were talking about earlier, that transition into adolescence.
Absolutely. Those teenage years, I mean, they're already such a roller coaster of
All
emotions.
right?
And then you add sleep deprivation on top of that?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about throwing fuel on the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we talked about, how sleep-deprived teens are more prone to mood swings, irritability, anxiety, depression. But it's the long-term impact that really concerns me. Could chronic sleep loss during adolescence actually, increase the risk of mental health issues later in
Well,
life?
that's what researchers are, really trying to figure out right now.
Yeah.
And the evidence that's emerging, it's pointing in that direction. It seems that chronic sleep deprivation during those really important formative years can have a lasting effect on brain development
Yeah.
and potentially make individuals, more vulnerable to those mental health challenges later down the road.
It's like we're setting them up for a lifetime of struggles, potentially.
And the irony is that teenagers often need more sleep than younger children.
I know it doesn't make sense.
But they're facing, more pressure from all sides.
Yeah, you've got the demands of school, extracurriculars, social media. I mean, it's almost like a recipe for sleep deprivation.
It is, and we're not helping by sending these mixed messages. We praise hard work and dedication, but then at the same time, we're kind of glorifying sleep deprivation as if it's this badge of honor.
Right, like it's something to be proud of.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to flip that script.
We do. We need to start talking about sleep as an essential part of a healthy lifestyle. Just like, eating right, exercising.
So it's not just about telling our kids to go to bed earlier. It's about changing our own behavior and attitudes towards sleep.
Absolutely. It's about, walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, this has certainly been a wake-up call for me, no pun intended.
I hear that.
I'm really starting to think about, what changes I need to make in my own family. But for our listeners out there who are feeling that same kind of like, oh my gosh, what do we do? What's the one thing they should take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is that sleep is not optional. It's not a luxury. It's a fundamental biological need, just like eating and breathing.
Okay.
And when it comes to children's emotional well-being, prioritizing sleep is one of the most powerful investments we can make.
And that investment pays off, not just, during their childhood, but throughout their lives.
Precisely.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into, how sleep affects children's emotional well-being. We really hope you found it insightful, informative, maybe even a little bit empowering.
We did too.
And, if you're out there listening and you have questions, keep those questions coming. Stay curious and prioritize those Z's.
Yeah, sleep well, everyone.